a black boy from a rental complex, claiming his daddy is a 4-star general. That is the most ridiculous lie I have heard in 23 years of teaching. Mrs. Patricia. Whitmore didn't whisper it. She didn't pull him aside to spare his feelings. She announced it. Her voice carried all the way to the back of the room. It bounced off laminated maps and the chalkboard, and it made sure every single 4th grader at Jefferson Elementary heard the verdict. Then she snatched the paper off the desk. Rip! The sound was violent, sudden, like a bone snapping. In a silent room, Hughes, 10 years old, wearing sneakers that had seen better days, watched the pieces of his handwritten assignment drift down to the linoleum like dirty snow. You don't get to make up fairy tales about being special, Lucas. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Generals live in mansions, in Mick Lane. Their children go to Sidwell Friends. They drive Mercedes. Her eyes narrowed and scanned his faded t-shirt. They certainly don't show up looking like you. Lucas stood frozen. His lungs felt full of concrete. He wanted to scream, to shove the paper back together, to tell her she was wrong. But he couldn't. He couldn't breathe. And to understand how a 10-year-old boy ended up standing in the wreckage of his own pride, shaking, while 25 classmates stared in silence. We have to go back 2 hours. The only sound in the Hughes household was bacon, sizzling, and the low hum of the refrigerator. It was a modest 3-bedroom apartment in Arlington, Virginia, close enough to Fort Myer that if the wind was right, you could hear the morning bugle drift over the highway traffic. Inside, the furniture was clean but worn. The beige carpet had a permanent dent where the sofa sat. The kitchen table had scratches from years of homework and family dinners. The walls were lined with framed family photos, but they were conspicuously generic. Beach trips, birthday parties, a shot of Lucas on a bike. There were no shadow boxes, no folded flags, no medals gleaming behind glass, no challenge coins on the mantle. General Vincent Hughes sat at the kitchen table, nursing a black coffee. He wasn't wearing his dress blues. He wore a faded Georgetown Hoyas sweatshirt and a pair of Kirkland jeans that had seen the inside of too many washing machines. To a casual observer, he looked like an exhausted high school football coach, or maybe a shift manager at a logistics firm. He checked his watch. Breakfast in 5. Soldier. Lucas came bounding down the stairs, backpack already slung over one shoulder. He skidded into the kitchen. His eyes went straight to the refrigerator. Right there, held up by a magnet from a pizza place, was a child's drawing in crayon, a stick figure in a green uniform, 4 exaggerated stars on each shoulder, standing next to a tank. Beside it, a calendar date circled in thick red ink. Career Day. Dad. Lucas slid into his chair. Can I tell them about the time you met the president, or the time you had to take the helicopter to the Pentagon? Vincent exchanged a look. With his wife, Anjulu, she leaned against the counter. Navy blue scrubs, a travel mug in hand. Before her shift at Walter Reed, it was a look they'd exchanged 1,000 times, a silent conversation between parents trying to cross a minefield. Anjulu's eyes were soft, pleading. Give him this one, Vince. Vincent set his mug down. Ceramic clinked against wood. Lucas, remember the briefing? Vincent's voice was gentle, but it carried the unmistakable weight of command. We talked about this. Operational security isn't just for work, it's for the family. We keep a low profile. I know, Lucas mumbled. He stabbed a piece of melon with his fork. But Tyler Bennett is bringing a piece of the Berlin Wall his dad got. And Sophia said her mom is bringing a badge from the Capitol. And that's great for them, Vincent said. But our family is different. We don't advertise. You understand why, right? Lucas nodded, but his eyes stayed on his bowl. He didn't understand. Not really. In his 10-year-old mind, having a dad who ran entire theaters of operation was a superpower, like being the son of Batman. Except Batman drove a 2014 Honda Accord and made him mow the lawn. So why did other kids get to shine while he had to live in the shadows? Anjulu walked over and squeezed Vincent's shoulder. Her fingers dug in just slightly. He deserves to be proud of you, Vincent, she whispered, low enough that Lucas couldn't hear. He's 10. He's not an operative. Vincent looked at his son, the slump of his shoulders, the dimming of that morning spark. The general sighed, the tension in his jaw released. Just a fraction. Tell you what, Vincent said, "Keep it simple. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Lucas. The truth is the truth, whether they salute it or not. Just write what we discussed. I'll be there." At 2 p.m. sharp, Lucas looked up, hope flickering back on. "Promise?" "That's a direct order." Vincent winked. "Now move out. You're burning daylight." Lucas grabbed a piece of toast and ran for the door. He didn't know that in less than 4 hours, keeping it simple would become impossible. And he certainly didn't know he was walking into an ambush. Jefferson Elementary was supposed to be the great equalizer. It sat in the heart of the DC suburbs, a brick-and-mortar mixing bowl for the transient population of the nation's capital. Diplomat kids, whose parents worked at embassies on Massachusetts Avenue, sat next to kids whose parents washed dishes at diners in Alexandria. Future Ivy Leaguers shared glue sticks with recent immigrants, still learning the language. But inside room 3B, equality was a myth. Mrs. Patricia Whitmore had taught at Jefferson. For 23 years, she was an institution. She wore Talbot's blazers, sensible heels, an American flag pin on her lapel. Every single day, her classroom was a shrine to her own localized power. Photos of her shaking hands with the mayor, certificates of excellence in education, framed in gold, and a seating chart that seemed to separate the promising students from the troublemakers. She had never served in the military. She had never lived outside of Virginia. She had never worked a day in the gritty, high-stakes reality of national defense. But Mrs. Whitmore prided herself on knowing people. She believed she had a radar clap for breeding and for truth. And Lucas Hughes disrupted her radar. "Good morning, Jefferson Elementary." Principal Hayes' voice crackled over the intercom. Static fuzzed the edges of his words. "A reminder that our Parent Career Day guests will be arriving after lunch. Please make them feel welcome." In Mrs. Whitmore's class, the atmosphere shifted instantly. A subtle electrical charge, the preening of the privileged. Tyler Bennett, a boy with a perfectly combed side part, and a father who lobbied for the energy sector, shot his hand up. "Mrs. Whitmore, my dad is meeting with 3 senators this morning about the infrastructure bill. But he said he's moving his schedule just for us." Mrs. Whitmore beamed. Her smile was practiced, tight and reserved, for the front row. "How impressive, Tyler. Public service is the backbone of our democracy. Make sure you have his name tag ready." From the back row, Sophia Wilson raised her hand, quiet, wearing a hand-me-down sweater. "My mom works at the Capitol, too," she said softly. "She cleans the offices on the 3rd floor. She says she sees the senators sometimes." Mrs. Whitmore's smile didn't vanish, but it changed temperature. It dropped 10 degrees. "That's nice, Sophia." Her tone was dismissive, already turning her back to write on the board. Honest work is important. "Now, class, open your composition notebooks." Lucas watched the exchange. His stomach tightened. He'd seen this pattern 100 times. There was a currency in this room, and it wasn't grades. It was who your parents were, what car they drove in the drop-off line, and how much they contributed to the PTA fundraiser. At 10 o'clock, Mrs. Patricia Whitmore announced. She checked the clock. "I want the final drafts of your parent introductions. 3 paragraphs. Who are they? What do they do? And why does it matter to our country? Best handwriting. No scribbles." Then she began to prowl the aisles. Tap, 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 her heels. Lucas opened his notebook. He picked up his pencil. He remembered his dad's words. "The truth is the truth." He began to write. He wrote about the sacrifices. He wrote about the leadership. He wrote about the 4 stars. He didn't try to make it sound like a movie. He tried to make it sound like his dad. He poured his heart onto the college-ruled paper, carefully crossing his T's and dotting his I's. He was proud. For the first time all year, he felt like he had an ace up his sleeve. At 10:15, Mrs. Whitmore reached his desk. She stopped. The tapping ceased. Lucas looked up, a tentative smile. He slid the paper toward her. Mrs. Whitmore picked it up. She adjusted her reading glasses. She skimmed the first line. Then she stopped. She read it again. Her eyebrows knitted together, not in confusion, in something darker. Something like offense. She looked at Lucas, then back at the paper, then back at Lucas again. Really looked at him, taking in the scuffed sneakers, the generic backpack, the rental apartment aura. She was convinced she could smell on people. A cold laugh escaped her lips. Mirthless, loud enough that the kids at the next table stopped writing. Lucas, her voice dripped with sickly sweet poison. Is this a creative writing exercise? No, ma'am, Lucas said. His voice was small. It's for career day, I see. She straightened up, towering over him. The room went silent. Every eye turned to them, because it says here that your father is a general, a 4-star general. Yes, ma'am. General Vincent Hughes. Lucas, she sighed. A theatrical sound of exhaustion. Lying is a terrible habit, but lying about stolen valor? That is disrespectful to the families in this school, who actually serve. I'm not lying, Lucas said. His voice trembled, but it carried. He is. Mrs. Whitmore's face hardened. The mask of the benevolent educator slipped, and what was underneath was a bully. She didn't like being challenged, especially not by a boy. She had already filed under troublemaker. Stand up. Lucas stood, his legs shaking. Class. She addressed the room, holding Lucas's paper up like evidence. In a murder trial, we have a teaching moment here. It is important to have dreams, but it is more important to know your place. In reality, she turned back to Lucas, her eyes cold, dead. I'm going to do you a favor, Lucas. I'm going to save you from embarrassing yourself in front of our guests this afternoon. She gripped the top of the page with her left hand, the bottom with her right. Lucas's eyes went wide. Wait, rip? She tore the assignment in half. Then she put the halves together and tore them again. Then she dropped the confetti into the trash can next to his desk. Now, she dusted her hands off like she'd just touched something filthy. Sit down and start over. Write about what your father actually does, even if he's unemployed. There is no shame in it. The shame is in the lie. She turned on her heel and walked away. Lucas sat down. The silence in the room was deafening. He felt 25 pairs of eyes boring into him. He felt heat radiating off his face. He looked at the trash can, where the truth lay, in shreds. He didn't pick up his pencil. He just stared at the clock on the wall. 10:20 a.m. His father was coming. At 2 p.m., Mrs. Whitmore thought she had solved a problem. She thought she had crushed a lie. She had no idea. She had just declared war on the wrong family. And she certainly didn't know that the man in the Gorgetown sweatshirt wasn't just a father. He was a man who commanded the 82nd Airborne, and he was driving toward the school, expecting to see his son smile. Instead, he was going to walk into a crime scene. Lucas didn't cry. He didn't run out of the room. He reached into his desk, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, and sharpened his pencil until the point felt like a weapon. He began to write. He didn't write the apology Mrs. Whitmore wanted. He didn't write a fictional story about a dad who worked at a bank or a grocery store just to make his teacher happy. He wrote the truth again, pressing down so hard the graphite nearly snapped. My dad is a 4-star general in the United States Army. He has served our country for 32 years. In places most people can't find on a map. Iraq, Afghanistan, the Korean DMZ. There are only about 40 4-star generals in the entire military. He is one of them. Lucas paused. He stared at the words. Then he added a line. His father had told him 100 times during backyard catch sessions. He says leadership isn't about power. It's about serving others, not yourself. To his left, D. Sean Williams leaned over the aisle. High top fade, eyes that didn't miss a thing. Yo, D. Sean whispered, barely moving his lips. For real? Your pops is a general? Like in Call of Duty? Lucas kept his eyes on the paper. He nodded slightly. Yeah. He just doesn't talk about it much. Operational security, that's wild. D-Sean breathed. My dad just fixes transmissions. At the Goodyear, on Route 7, Lucas looked at his friend. My dad says every job matters. If your dad doesn't fix the cars, people can't get to work. That keeps the country running. 2. D-Sean grinned and sat up a little straighter. Then, a shadow fell across Lucas's desk. The temperature seemed to drop. Mrs. Whitmore stood there, smelling of chalk dust and expensive perfume. She leaned down. Her eyes scanned the new paper. She saw the words, and general. Her lips disappeared into a thin white line. She didn't yell this time. She didn't tear it up. Instead, a look of profound satisfaction settled over her face. The look of a predator who realizes the prey has tied its own noose. She believed she'd given him a chance to come clean, to be realistic, and he had chosen to lie again. She walked back to her desk, opened her leather-bound planner, and made a small, neat check mark next to Lucas's name. It felt less like a grade, more like a sentence. The rest of the day was a blur of anxiety. During the afternoon bathroom break, Lucas huddled in a stall. He checked his backpack. He had an old iPhone 8, a hand-me-down from his mom, for emergencies. He powered it on, hiding the glow of the screen. One new message. Mom, Dad's transport from Seoul landed early at Andrews. He's running on 0 sleep, but he's en route. He says he wouldn't miss this for the world. Keep it a surprise. Lucas's heart hammered against his ribs. His dad was back. He was actually in the same time zone. For weeks, Lucas had pictured him in a bunker somewhere in the Pacific. Now, he was on I-395. Lucas slipped the phone back into his bag. He flushed the toilet to cover the sound of the zipper. Then he walked back into class with his head high, unaware that Mrs. Whitmore was watching him from her desk. She saw the bounce in his step. She saw the defiance. Let him have his moment, she thought, as she organized the visitor badges for tomorrow. Tomorrow, he learns that actions have consequences. The next morning, the parking lot of Jefferson Elementary looked like a socioeconomic battleground. By 8:30 a.m., the parents began to file into room 3B. The hierarchy that ruled Washington was on full display, crammed into tiny student chairs. There was Tyler Bennett's father, the lobbyist, wearing a suit that cost more than Mrs. Whitmore's car, talking loudly on a Bluetooth earpiece. About killing the amendment. In committee, there was an architect rolling out blueprints on a back table. And there were the others. Deshawn's dad, wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit stained with grease, holding his hat in his hands, respectfully. Sophia's mother, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner, sitting quietly in the corner. Mrs. Whitmore worked the room like a politician. She practically sprinted to the lobbyist. Mr. Bennett, so wonderful to have you. We're all dying to hear about your work on the Hill. She gave the architect a warm, two-handed handshake. Then she turned to the mechanic and the cleaner. Her smile became tight, polite, and vanishingly brief. Thank you for coming, she said, and then immediately turned her back to arrange the seating chart. Lucas sat at his desk, his leg bouncing nervously. He checked his watch. 9:58 a.m. His dad wasn't there. The door was closed. The parents were seated. The presentation was starting. Class, eyes on me. Mrs. Whitmore clapped her hands, silencing the room. Before our distinguished guests present, I want a few of you to read the introductions you wrote yesterday. I want our visitors to hear how thoughtfully you perceive the working world. She was setting the stage. Tyler, why don't you start us off? Tyler stood up. He puffed out his chest. He read a paragraph about how his dad knew senators and helped pass laws. That made business better. The lobbyist beamed. Mrs. Whitmore looked like she was watching a puppy learn to walk. Pure adoration. Excellent, Tyler, a future leader. Then she called on Sophia. Sophia read about her mother keeping the Capitol clean, so democracy could happen. It was sweet, honest. Mrs. Whitmore gave a curt nod. Very nice, Sophia. Next, she scanned the room. Her eyes landed on Lucas. She knew his dad wasn't in the room. She had checked the sign-in sheet. No Vincent Hughes. No general. Just an empty chair. And a boy she was convinced was a pathological liar. This was it. The teaching moment. Lucas Hughes, her voice projected to the back of the room. Please stand and share your essay with the class. And remember, we value honesty above all else. At Jefferson. Lucas stood up. His knees felt like water. He looked at the empty doorway. Nothing. He looked down at his paper. He took a breath. That shuddered in his chest. My dad, Lucas began. His voice cracked. Before it found its strength, is a 4-star general in the United States Army. A few parents shifted in their seats. The lobbyist looked up from his BlackBerry, an eyebrow raised. Mrs. Whitmore crossed her arms, a smug, tragic look on her face. He has served our country for 32 years. Lucas continued, reading louder now, to drown out his own fear in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Korea. He misses birthdays and holidays to keep us safe. Lucas looked up from the paper. He looked directly at Mrs. Whitmore. He says a true leader doesn't need to be loud. They just need to be there. The room went dead silent, awkward. The adults sensed the tension, a child making a grandiose claim, a teacher seething with disapproval, and an empty chair where this mythical father was supposed to be. Mrs. Whitmore uncrossed her arms. She took a step forward, ready to intervene. ready to gently but firmly expose the fantasy for the good of the child. She opened her mouth to speak, but she never got the words out, because at that exact second, the heavy oak door to the classroom didn't just open, it swung wide. And the man standing in the frame wasn't General Hughes. It was Vice Principal Thornton, clutching a clipboard, wearing his standard issue blue polo shirt. Stopping by for a routine observation, he leaned against the doorframe, bored. Lucas didn't see him. He only saw the empty space where his father wasn't. He swallowed the lump in his throat and kept reading, his voice trembling, but determined. He says leadership means serving others, not yourself. Stop. The word didn't just interrupt him. It detonated in the room, like a gunshot. Mrs. Whitmore didn't shout. She didn't have to. That single syllable sucked the oxygen right out of room 3B. The parents looked up from their phones. The lobbyist stopped checking his emails. Vice Principal Thornton straightened in the doorway. Lucas froze. The paper in his hands shook violently. Lucas, come here. Mrs. Whitmore's voice had shifted from teacher to prosecutor. Please. Lucas walked to the front of the room. His legs felt like they were made of lead. He could feel Deshawn's eyes on him, wide, panicked. Class. Mrs. Whitmore addressed the room. She gestured to Lucas like he was a museum exhibit on moral decay. This is a perfect example of what we call embellishment. Then she turned to Lucas. Her face leaned in close enough that he could smell her coffee breath. Lucas, I need you to be honest with our guests. What does your father actually do? Lucas looked at his sneakers. Then he looked at her. He's a general, ma'am. Don't. She snapped. Her voice dropped an octave. I have been teaching in this county for 23 years. I have taught the children of senators. I have taught the children of admirals. She crossed her arms. Her eyes darted over his worn-out clothes. Generals do not live in the Lakeview rental complex. Their children do not wear sneakers, held together with superglue. And they certainly don't have fathers, who are invisible. But ma'am, Lucas whispered, his face burning hotter than the sun. He keeps a low profile. Because of secret missions. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the classroom. The architect covered a smile with his hand. Secret missions, Mrs. Whitmore repeated. Sarcasm dripped from her tongue like venom. Lucas, I checked your file in the main office yesterday on your emergency contact card. Read that under father's occupation. It lists government employee, not general, not officer, just employee. She smiled, triumphant, cruel. That is very different from a 4-star general, isn't it? Lucas's vision blurred. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. He puts that on the forms for security. He told me, you will sit down, she hissed. Right, now, you will rewrite this assignment with the truth that your father is perhaps a clerk, or a driver, or unemployed. And then you will apologize to this class for wasting their time with your fantasies. Lucas didn't move. The tears spilled over, hot tracks on his cheeks, but his feet stayed planted. Lucas, I said sit down. Lucas looked up. He looked at Vice Principal Thornton in the doorway, just watching, checking his watch. He looked at the parents. Then he looked at Mrs. Whitmore, dead in the eye. My dad didn't raise a liar, ma'am. The silence that followed was absolute. The silence of a bomb about to go off. Mrs. Whitmore's face turned a violent shade of crimson. Her jaw clenched so hard, a muscle popped in her cheek. To the principal's office, she whispered. Now, Deshawn jumped up from his desk. But Mrs. Whitmore, he ain't lying. I've seen, sit down, Deshawn, she roared. A manicured finger pointed straight at him. Unless you want to join him. Deshawn sank back. He shot Lucas a look of helpless apology. Lucas grabbed his backpack. He walked toward the door, passing rows of parents who refused to make eye contact. As he reached the threshold, Mrs. Whitmore delivered the final blow, loud enough for the entire hallway to hear. Class, let this be a lesson. Character is about accepting who you are, trying to be something you're not. That is the opposite of integrity. Lucas stepped into the hallway. The door clicked shut. Behind him, he was alone. He had 90 minutes until 10 a.m., 90 minutes to survive the shame. He checked his phone again. No messages, just the lock screen, staring back at him. The walk to the front office felt like walking to the gallows. His sneakers squeaked against the polished linoleum. Squeak, 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 a rhythm of isolation through the walls. He heard Mrs. Whitmore's voice return to its sugary sweet tone. Now, who would like to share next? She had erased him. Just like that. Lucas reached the glass-walled main office. Inside, Principal Hayes stood behind her desk, a phone pressed to her ear. She wasn't smiling. She looked intense. Her eyes scanned a manila folder, open in front of her. She glanced up, locked eyes with Lucas through the glass. Her eyes widened. A flash of recognition? Fear? Gone. In an instant, she turned her back, huddled over the receiver. Speaking in hushed, urgent tones, "Go have a seat, son," the receptionist said, without looking up. Lucas sat on the hard plastic bench. A moment later, Vice Principal Thornton strolled in, looking inconvenienced. He sighed, adjusted his khakis, then motioned for Lucas to follow him into a cramped side office. "All right, Lucas," Thornton said. He closed the door, leaned back in his creaky chair. He looked at the boy, like a paperwork error that needed filing. "Mrs. Whitmore says we have a habitual lying problem. She says you're disrupting the sanctity of career day." "I'm not lying," Lucas said, his voice hollow. Thornton chuckled, dry, patronizing. "Look, kid, we all want our dads to be Superman, but at some point, you gotta grow up. We're gonna have to call your mother to come get you." This behavior is... The door to the office flew open. It wasn't Mrs. Whitmore. It was Principal Hayes. Breathless, her face pale, stripped of its usual administrative calm, she gripped her cell phone so hard, her knuckles were white. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice trembling. "Stop talking." Thornton blinked, confused. "Excuse me? I'm just handling the..." "I said stop," Hayes commanded. She looked at Lucas, and for the first time, there was no judgment in her eyes, only pure, unadulterated panic. She held up her phone. That was the Pentagon on the line. She whispered, "They wanted to know if our parking lot can handle a motorcade." Thornton frowned. "A what? For who?" Principal Hayes pointed a shaking finger toward the front window. "For him." Thornton turned to the window. His jaw dropped, turning onto the school's quiet suburban street, though it wasn't a parent's minivan. It was a black SUV, tinted windows, then another, then a third, and on the front bumper of the lead vehicle, gleaming in the morning sun, were 4 silver stars, while Principal Hayes sprinted toward the front entrance to meet the impossible motorcade idling at the curb. Inside Vice Principal Thornton's office, the machinery of bureaucracy was still blindly grinding. Lucas Hughes, down. Vice Principal Thornton didn't know about the black SUVs. He didn't know about the 4 stars. He only knew what was in the file. "Sit down, Lucas." Lucas climbed into the chair opposite the heavy oak desk. It was designed for adults. His sneakers dangled 3 inches off the carpet, making him look even smaller than he felt. Thornton opened a manila folder. He sighed, the sigh of a man who just wanted his morning coffee. "Mrs. Whitmore tells me you disrupted the flow of career day. She says you refused to correct false information, sir." "It's not false." Lucas's voice trembled, but it was clear. "My dad really is." Thornton held up a hand, silencing him. "I pulled your file, son." He tapped a printed sheet of paper. "Father, Vincent Hughes. Occupation, government employee. That is what is in our system. That is what your parents wrote on the enrollment forms. That's for security, sir." "He's not supposed to." "Security reasons." Thornton chuckled. It wasn't a mean laugh, which made it worse. It was the laugh of an adult, indulging a toddler who claims to be a dinosaur. "Lucas, look, I understand. You want your dad to be a hero. A lot of kids from complex backgrounds do this. Complex backgrounds? Single-parent homes, rental accommodations, families where the parents work shift jobs." Thornton leaned forward, his face softened into a mask of condescending pity. "You create these elaborate stories to feel special. Psychologists call it a fantasy defense. It's a cry for help. My parents are married," Lucas said. His hands gripped the armrests. "My mom is a surgeon at Walter Reed. My dad is..." "Psst." Lucas flinched. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "Dad." Briefing ran long. "Chopper landing at Andrews now. ETA 10:30. Hang tight, soldier." Lucas's heart leaped into his throat. He shoved the screen toward the vice principal. "Look, he's coming. He'll be here in less than an hour." Thornton barely glanced at the cracked screen. "Lucas, anyone can change a contact name to Dad. I can't verify." A text message. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to return to room 3B. You are going to apologize to Mrs. Whitmore for the disrespect. You are going to rewrite that assignment with truthful, humble information. And then we are going to move on. You don't believe me? Lucas whispered. "I believe you need attention," Thornton said. He opened the door. "Now go, before I have to call your mother and put a formal disciplinary mark on your permanent record. You don't want to start middle school, labeled as a problem child." Lucas stood up slowly. His vision swam with hot, angry tears he refused to shed. "My father serves this country, sir," Lucas said. His voice cracked. "He's been deployed 6 times. He earned the right to be believed." Thornton just pointed down the hall. The walk back to room 3B felt like a funeral procession. When Lucas pushed the door open, the atmosphere had shifted. The classroom was no longer a place of learning. It was a theater. Parents filled the back of the room, a semicircle of folding chairs. The air smelled of expensive cologne and anxiety. Mrs. Whitmore stood at the front, beaming at Mr. Bennett, the lobbyist, so grateful to have such distinguished guests. "Mr. Bennett works with the movers and shakers of DC. Let's give him a round of applause." Polite clapping rippled through the room. Lucas tried to slide into his desk, invisibly, but the silence he created was deafening. Deshawn leaned over. "You okay, man?" Before Lucas could nod, Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through the air like razor wire. "Lucas," she turned. Her smile dropped. Instantly. "Do you have something to share with the class?" Every head turned. The lobbyist, the architect, the cleaning lady, the mechanic, all staring at a 10-year-old boy, freezing in the aisle. "Ma'am, your apology," Mrs. Whitmore said, arms crossed. "We are waiting." Lucas felt his stomach drop through the floor. This wasn't just a correction anymore. This was a public execution. I don't have anything to apologize for, ma'am." The room gasped, a sharp, collective intake of breath. Mrs. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Excuse me? In front of our honored guests? You are choosing defiance?" Mrs. Whitmore, a soft voice. Mrs. Bennett, Tyler's mother, a corporate lawyer in a sharp gray suit. She raised a hand. She looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should let the child explain privately?" "This feels a bit—" "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Bennett," Mrs. Whitmore snapped. Her eyes never left Lucas. "But classroom management is my responsibility. We cherish honesty here." She walked toward Lucas, closing the distance until she was looming over him. "You have 2 choices, young man. You can apologize right now and admit to this class that you exaggerated, or you can spend the rest of career day in the hallway while your classmates enjoy the pizza party. Which will it be?" Lucas looked at the clock. 10:15. "When my dad gets here," Lucas started. "Your father is not coming, Lucas." Mrs. Whitmore shouted it. The veneer of patience finally cracked. "Sweetheart," she continued. She lowered her voice, a toxic, pitying coo, somehow worse than the shouting. "I know this is hard. I know you're embarrassed. The truth is, your father probably works a perfectly fine job. Maybe he's a clerk at the VA. Maybe he drives a truck on base. Those are respectable jobs." She leaned in, performing for the parents, showing them how she handled troubled youth. "But you have created this fantasy about generals and secret missions because you look at Tyler's dad or the other parents and you feel inadequate. You want your family to seem important, but lying to make yourself feel big only makes you look small." She straightened up. She gestured to the door. "Last chance. Apologize." Lucas opened his mouth. He wanted to scream. He wanted to run, but he didn't have to do either, because from the hallway, a sound arrived. Heavy, rhythmic, thud, thud, thud. Multiple pairs of polished combat boots hitting the linoleum in perfect unison. Then a voice boomed from the doorway. A voice like gravel and command. Mrs. Whitmore. She spun around. Standing in the doorway wasn't just a man. It was 2 military police officers in full tactical gear, flanking a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dress blue uniform. His chest was heavy with ribbons, and on each shoulder, 4 silver stars caught the fluorescent classroom lights, shining like warnings. General Vincent Hughes stepped into the room. He didn't look at the parents. He didn't look at the lobbyist. He looked straight at the teacher. "I believe," the general said. His voice filled every corner of the room. "You asked for an apology and to understand the sheer, catastrophic weight of the silence that fell over room 3B. When General Hughes walked through that door, we have to rewind the clock. Exactly 3 minutes. Back to the moment Mrs. Whitmore decided to twist the knife one last time. She wasn't shouting anymore. She dropped her voice to that dangerous, quiet register. The one teachers use when they want to dismantle a child's spirit without leaving a bruise. "Lucas," she said, leaning against his desk, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "There is no shame in being ordinary. The shame is in lying about it, especially," she paused, her eyes flickered over his clothes, then to Deshawn, then back to Lucas. "Especially when you come from a community that already struggles with stereotypes about honesty." It was a dog whistle so loud, it might as well have been a siren. Mrs. Bennett, the corporate lawyer in the gray suit, stood up abruptly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I really don't think—" "Please, Mrs. Bennett." Whitmore snapped, not even looking at her. "Sit down." The lawyer sat, mouth tight, looking around the room in disbelief. From the next desk over, Deshawn Williams couldn't take it anymore. He slammed his pencil down. "Yo, this is messed up." Mrs. Whitmore spun around. "Excuse me? I said this is messed up." Deshawn said, loud enough for the back row to hear, "He ain't lying, and you're just being mean because you don't believe him." "Deshawn Williams," she hissed, pointing to the door. "Main office. Now." "But I didn't now." Deshawn grabbed his backpack. He shoved his chair back. He looked at Lucas, a nod of solidarity from the trenches. Then he stormed out into the hallway. Lucas was alone, completely isolated, in a room full of adults, too polite, too shocked, or too indifferent to stop the bleeding. The clock on the wall read 9:28 a.m. Lucas looked at the empty space on his desk, where his assignment used to be. He looked at Mrs. Whitmore's crossed arms. And then, the 10-year-old boy did something that wasn't in the lesson plan. He stood up. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "My name is Lucas Hughes. My father is General Vincent Hughes. He is a 4-star general in the United States Army. He has served for 32 years. Lucas took a breath. He looked her dead in the eye. "And when he gets here, you are going to owe me an apology." Mrs. Whitmore's face flushed. Deep, ugly, red. "Sit." "No, ma'am. Look out. If you do not sit down right now, I will." The classroom door didn't just open, it flew inward. Principal Hayes stepped inside, out of breath, chest heaving, her usually immaculate hair slightly askew. "Mrs. Whitmore," Hayes said, "hallway, immediately." It wasn't a request, it was an order. "Principal Hayes, I am in the middle of a—" "Now, Patricia!" The use of the first name hit the room like a slap. Mrs. Whitmore blinked. Her arrogance faltered for the first time. She followed Hayes into the hallway. The door clicked shut. Inside the classroom, the oxygen returned. Students whispered. Parents exchanged worried glances. But outside, in the corridor, the world was ending. Hayes spun on her heel. She faced her teacher. "Patricia, we have a situation." Whitmore crossed her arms, trying to regain her composure. "If this is about Lucas Hughes, I was simply maintaining standards. The boy is clearly delusional, and I just spent 20 minutes on the phone with the Pentagon's protocol office." Hayes cut her off, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. The words hung in the air. Pentagon, protocol. Mrs. Whitmore blinked. "The who?" "They called." Hayes said. She held up her cell phone, her hand shaking, because they needed to confirm our security clearance for a Tier 1 VIP arrival. They needed to know if our parking lot could accommodate a tactical security detail. Mrs. Whitmore's face went the color of ash. "Security detail? For career day? For Lucas Hughes' father?" Hayes whispered. "No." Whitmore stammered, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible. He lives in the rental complex. There's no social registry. There's no—" "Lucas Hughes," Hayes continued. "Stepping closer is the son of General Vincent Hughes, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. And you just publicly humiliated him. You called him a liar. You tore up his work. I didn't know," Whitmore gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "He keeps a low profile. It's not fair. Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I thought he was lying." "Look outside. Trisha," Hayes commanded. She pointed to the glass doors at the end of the hall. "Look outside and tell me if that looks like a lie." Whitmore turned. Through the glass, she saw them. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans pulled up onto the sidewalk, blocking the bus lane. Sleek, dark like sharks. Men in dark suits and sunglasses, Secret Service or CID. It didn't matter. They were already out, scanning the perimeter with practiced, lethal precision. Then, the door of the center SUV opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, imposing. He wore the Army service uniform, the dress blues, the jacket, immaculate. A chest full of ribbons told a story, 3 decades of war. And on each shoulder, catching the morning sun, 4 silver stars. General Vincent Hughes adjusted his cover. Then he began to walk toward the school entrance. He didn't look like a parent. Coming for a visit, he looked like a storm, making landfall. "Oh God," Whitmore whispered. She clutched the wall for support. "He's real." "Yes, he is," Hazy said, her voice icy. "And right now, he is walking into my school to pick up the pieces of what you did to his son." Inside the classroom, the murmurs had turned into a roar. Mr. Bennett, the lobbyist, stood at the window. That's a 4-star general," he stammered. He looked back at the other parents. "Do you know how rare that is? That's like seeing a unicorn." Lucas sat at his desk, his eyes fixed on the door. He didn't look out the window. He didn't need to. He knew that walk. The door handle turned. The room went silent. And then he was there. General Hughes filled the doorway. He scanned the room, past the stunned parents, past the terrified Vice Principal Thornton. Then he locked eyes with Lucas. The general's face softened, just for a fraction of a second. He gave his son a nearly imperceptible nod. "I'm here." Then he turned his gaze to the empty desk at the front of the room, where Mrs. Whitmore usually stood. He stepped fully into the classroom, the sound of his boots echoing like a gavel, striking a sounding block. He looked at the torn pieces of paper, still visible in the trash can. He looked at the parents. Then he spoke, his voice deep, calm, and terrifyingly polite. "I apologize for the delay," the general said. "I understand there was some confusion regarding my son's assignment. I am here to clarify the record." He walked to the front of the room. He stood behind Mrs. Whitmore's podium. He looked like he owned the building. He looked like he owned the zip code. "Now," he said, scanning the faces of the adults who had watched his son cry without lifting a finger. "Who is the teacher in charge?" Principal Hayes met him just past the security checkpoint. Her hands were trembling. She clasped them together to hide it. "General Hughes, sir," she said, her voice tight. "I'm Principal Hayes. I want to apologize profusely for..." He shook her hand, firm, brief, the kind that ends a conversation before it starts. He said, controlled, professional, but underneath the polish, steel. "I appreciate you accommodating the short notice. I apologize for the disruption to your school day." Behind Hayes, Mrs. Whitmore stood frozen against the lockers. Her face had drained of all color. She looked like a chalk drawing of herself. General Hughes' eyes moved to her. He didn't look angry. He looked assessing, like he was evaluating a weak point in a defensive line. "You are Lucas's teacher?" "Yes, sir," she stammered. "Mrs. Whitmore, General, I want to apologize. There was a terrible confusion about..." Confusion? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The word hung in the air, heavy, sharp. "My son was called a liar in front of his peers for telling the truth about his father's service." The general spoke quietly. "Where, exactly, was the confusion?" "Ma'am, I didn't know," she whispered. Her hands fluttered nervously. "I had no way to verify. I mean, based on the..." "You didn't verify," he interrupted. "You assumed." Mrs. Whitmore opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Silence stretched, agonizing, thick. "Ma'am," Hughes continued. He took a step closer. "I have spent 3 decades leading soldiers. I have briefed presidents. I have negotiated with foreign ministers. And one thing I have learned: assumptions about people, based on how they look, where they live, or what you think they should be, those assumptions are usually wrong, and they are always dangerous." He adjusted his uniform jacket, smoothing a microscopic wrinkle. "I have made decisions that affected thousands of lives in combat zones, but right now, the most important mission I have is checking on my 10-year-old son, who was humiliated for telling his truth." His eyes never left hers. "Where is Lucas?" The classroom door opened. Principal Hayes entered first. She plastered a professional smile over visible stress. "Class," she announced, her voice a little too high. "We have a very special guest joining us for Career Day." Mrs. Whitmore followed, looking like she might be sick. Then, General Vincent Hughes stepped through the doorway. The effect was instantaneous. The room didn't just go silent, it went vacuum silent. Every parent in the room stood up. Instinct. Mr. Bennett, the lobbyist who bragged about dining with senators, straightened his spine like a cadet at inspection. Dr. Carter, the surgeon in the back, placed her hand over her heart. The military families in the room froze. They recognized the rank immediately. 4 stars. You don't see 4 stars Walk into an elementary school. You see them on the news, standing behind the president. Lucas saw his father, and the dam broke. "Dad?" he whispered, a small, broken sound. General Hughes' professional demeanor cracked. For the first time, the soldier vanished, and only the father remained. He saw his son, sitting at that desk, tear-stained, exhausted, alone. He crossed the room, in 4 long strides, ignoring the parents, ignoring the teacher. He knelt right there on the linoleum, dropped to Lucas's level, and pulled his son into a fierce embrace. "I'm here, Lucas." He murmured into the boy's hair. "I'm here. I'm sorry I was late. Mission creep." Lucas buried his face in the rough wool of the uniform jacket and sobbed. Not because he was sad, because he had been holding the weight of the truth by himself for 2 hours. And now, finally, he could let go. The embrace lasted maybe 10 seconds. But in those 10 seconds, every adult in that room felt it. A pang of shame, deep in the gut. They had watched a child be destroyed for telling the truth, and they had done nothing. General Hughes stood up. He kept a firm grip on Lucas's hand. Then he turned to face the class. "Good morning," he said, calm, his voice projected to the back of the room. Without effort, "I am General Vincent Hughes, United States Army. I apologize for the disruption, but I promised my son I would be here, and I do not break promises to my son." He glanced at Mrs. Whitmore, standing by her desk, looking like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. "Ma'am," he said, a small nod in her direction. "I understand there was some question about the veracity of Lucas's assignment." The room held its breath. Mrs. Whitmore looked like she might faint. Principal Hayes stepped in quickly. "General Hughes, please, if you would like to share with the students about your career, we would be honored." Hughes nodded once. "Thank you." He turned back to the class. Lucas still holding his hand, standing a little taller. "Now, my son wrote that I am a 4-star general who has served for 32 years. Hughes began. "Every single word of that is true. I have commanded troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. I have served in Korea, Germany, and across the United States. Right now, I help develop military strategy for the Joint Chiefs of Staff." The students stared with wide eyes. Deshaun was grinning so hard, his face looked like it might split. Lucas also wrote that leadership means serving others, not yourself. The general continued. He didn't learn that from a textbook. He learned that by watching his mother, Dr. Angela Hughes, save children's lives. While I was halfway around the world, he learned it by moving 8 times, by changing schools 6 times, by spending birthdays and Christmases and Thanksgivings without his father because I was deployed. He paused. He looked at each student, then at each parent. My son didn't exaggerate in his assignment. If anything, he was modest. The truth of what military families sacrifice is harder than anything he wrote. On that paper, his eyes moved to Mrs. Whitmore. It wasn't a glare, it was a spotlight. When a child tells you their truth, he said softly, especially when that truth is difficult or doesn't match your expectations. The first instinct should be to listen, not to assume they are lying, because their truth makes you uncomfortable. He looked back at the class. "Now," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I believe I have some time for questions, and I brought something for everyone." He pulled out a handful of heavy gold coins, challenge coins, the currency of respect in the military. And as he began to hand them out, Principal Hayes' phone buzzed in her pocket. She checked it, frowning. It was a text from the superintendent. "Did you authorize a press pool on school grounds?" Channel 4 and the Post just pulled up. They say they got a tip about a discrimination incident involving a general. Hayes Z looked up at Mrs. Whitmore. The teacher didn't know it yet, but the general's arrival was only the beginning of her problems. The court of public opinion was about to open session, but inside room 3B, the battle for Mrs. Whitmore's soul was reaching its climax. The silence in the room wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy, with reckoning. Mrs. Whitmore looked at the general, then at the 10-year-old boy, whose spirit she had tried to crush between her thumb and forefinger. She took a step forward. Her defenses, 23 years of tenure, the awards, the I know better attitude, finally crumbled. "General Hughes," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I owe Lucas an apology, a real one." She turned to Lucas. She didn't stand over him this time. She bent her knees, lowered herself until she was looking up at him. Tears real and unbidden, cut tracks through her foundation. "Lucas," she said, and for the first time, she sounded like a human being. Instead of an institution, I was wrong, completely, utterly wrong. Lucas watched her, his hand still gripping his father's. "I made assumptions about you," she continued, her voice breaking. "I judged you based on where you live and what you wear, instead of who you are. I didn't listen, I didn't believe, and I hurt you." She wiped a tear away with a shaking hand. "You deserve to be believed. I am so sorry." Lucas looked up at his dad. The general's face was unreadable, but he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Your call, soldier." Lucas took a deep breath. He looked at the teacher, who had humiliated him, who had ripped his work to shreds. "Mrs. Whitmore," Lucas said quietly. "My dad says everybody makes mistakes. He says the important thing is what you do after you make them." The wisdom of those words, spoken by a child who had every right to be angry, hit the adults in the room like a physical blow. "Maybe," Lucas added, "you could just believe kids more, even when their stories sound too big to be true." Mrs. Whitmore closed her eyes, nodding fervently. "I will, Lucas. I promise. I will." The tension in the room finally broke. Deshawn was brought back from the vice principal's office. He looked confused until General Hughes shook his hand and thanked him for having the courage of a squad leader. Tyler Bennett, the lobbyist's son, walked up to Lucas. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything earlier," he mumbled, eyes on his shoes. "That was really brave." Even the parents were transformed. Mrs. Will's son, the cleaner who had sat in the corner, shook the general's hand, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saying that service matters, every kind." But General Hughes wasn't done teaching. He reached into his pocket again. He pulled out one of the heavy gold coins, a command coin, usually reserved for soldiers, who went above and beyond. The call of duty. He walked over to Mrs. Whitmore. "Ma'am," he said. She flinched, expecting a final reprimand. Instead, he pressed the coin into her palm. "I'm not giving you this for what happened this morning," his voice low. "I'm giving it to you for your apology. Owning a mistake like that takes real courage. Keep this. Use it to remember that growth comes from our failures, not our successes." Mrs. Whitmore clutched the cold metal, unable to speak. She just nodded, her hand over her heart. For the next 20 minutes, the general gave an impromptu masterclass on leadership. He didn't talk about war. He talked about integrity. He answered questions. And finally, Principal Hayes suggested a photo. Lucas stood front and center, his small hand engulfed in his father's large one, wearing the biggest, most vindicated smile of his life. That photo would hit Twitter. Within 48 hours, it would be retweeted by senators. It would be discussed on cable news. But the real story wasn't the viral moment. The real story was what happened when the cameras weren't there. That evening, the Hughes apartment was quiet. The modest rental Mrs. Whitmore had sneered at was now filled with the smell of takeout pizza and the soft hum of the television. Dr. Angela Hughes had left surgery early. The moment Vincent called her, she was still in her scrubs, sitting on the sunken beige couch with Lucas tucked under her arm, like a fledgling bird. General Hughes sat across from them. In the recliner, the uniform was gone. He was back in worn jeans and the Georgetown sweatshirt. Just a dad. Just Vince. "How are you feeling, baby?" Angela asked. She smoothed Lucas's hair. "Tired," Lucas admitted, leaning into her. "But good, I think." "What did you learn today?" Vincent asked. It was their family ritual. Find the lesson in the wreckage. Lucas thought about it, the ripping sound of the paper, the shame. But he also thought about the look on Mrs. Whitmore's face when she apologized and the weight of his dad's hand in his. "I learned that telling the truth is really hard sometimes," Lucas said, "especially when people don't want to believe you. But you should do it anyway." Vincent smiled. "That's a good lesson." And Lucas added, a mischievous glint in his eye, "I learned that Mrs. Whitmore is really scared of you." Angela laughed, a warm sound. That filled the room. Vincent chuckled. "She's not scared of me, Lucas," Vincent said. "She's scared of being wrong. There's a difference." Vincent walked over. He sat on the coffee table, leaning forward. So he was eye level with his son. "Lucas," he said, his voice dropping to that low, earnest rumble, the one he used for the most important briefings. "Your worth has nothing to do with my rank. You are valuable because of who you are. You're kind, you're honest, and today, you were braver than I've ever been." He reached out, brushed a stray hair from Lucas's forehead. "I never want you to think you need my accomplishments to matter." But Vincent paused. Guilt flashed behind his eyes. "I also realize now that keeping such a low profile puts you in an impossible position. I let you walk into an ambush, alone. And for that, I am sorry. So what happens now?" Lucas asked. Vincent smiled, grim, determined. "Now? Now we make sure this never happens to another kid at Jefferson Elementary, or anywhere else." 3 months later, if you walked into Jefferson Elementary, the brickwork looked the same, the linoleum still squeaked, the cafeteria still smelled like tater tots. But the atmosphere, the invisible architecture of the school had been gutted and rebuilt. It started with Principal Hayes. She didn't just issue a memo. She issued an ultimatum, mandatory, comprehensive, implicit bias training for every single staff member. No exceptions. No, I'm too busy. If you wanted a paycheck, you were in that seminar room, and sitting in the front row of every single session was Mrs. Patricia Whitmore. She didn't sit there with her arms crossed, checking the clock. She took notes. She raised her hand. She volunteered for the uncomfortable role-play scenarios. 2 months after the incident, at an all-hands faculty meeting, Mrs. Whitmore walked to the podium. She looked different. The stiff, armor-like blazer was gone, replaced by a softer cardigan. She looked tired, but she looked real. 3 months ago, she began, her voice trembling slightly. Before it found its footing, I heard a child because I couldn't see past my own assumptions. The room was silent. Teachers shifted in their seats. I looked at Lucas Hughes, she continued, and I decided his truth was impossible because it didn't match the picture in my head of what a general's family should look like. I realized that my instincts were just prejudices, dressed up as experience. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a heavy gold object. She held it up. The general's command coin caught the light. "I keep this on my desk," she said, "not as a trophy, but as a warning. It reminds me that growth comes from our mistakes, not our successes." The changes weren't just speeches, they were policy. The school implemented the Truth and Trust Initiative. If a student made a claim about their life, no matter how wild it sounded, the protocol was now verify. Don't interrogate. You call the parents. You check the file. You do not shame the child. Lucas Hughes became a founding member of the Student Peer Support Group. Room 3B transformed too. On the wall, painted in bold letters by the students themselves, a new charter. "In this classroom, we believe." First, Mrs. Whitmore started a family stories circle. No grades, no judgment, just listening. Sophia Wilson stood up. She talked about the marble floors her mother polished at the Capitol, how the senators would ask her mom for directions because she knew the building better than they did. Mrs. Whitmore didn't dismiss it. She leaned in, hearing the pride in the girl's voice. Deshaun bragged about his dad's mechanic shop, explaining how he could diagnose a transmission problem just by hearing the engine hum. And Tyler Bennett, the lobbyist's son, surprised everyone. He stood up and admitted that after meeting General Hughes, his dad's job of influencing bills felt a little less heroic. He started asking what service really meant. The listening changed everything. But outside the safe bubble of Jefferson Elementary, a different kind of storm was brewing. The photo. It started as a simple class picture, Principal Hayes' idea, but someone shared it, then someone else, then a local news affiliate in DC picked it up. Within 48 hours, the image was global, a striking composition, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in immaculately tailored army dress blues, 4 silver stars gleaming on his shoulders, kneeling on a dirty classroom floor to embrace his weeping son. The caption wrote itself, "The General and the Student, a story of truth, bias, and redemption." It hit the New York Times. It trended #1 on Twitter, shared by celebrities, politicians, activists. People loved the arc. The villainous teacher who actually learned a lesson. The father who showed up. The feel-good story of the year. 3 months later, Mrs. Patricia Whitmore stood on a stage, a hotel ballroom in Chicago. The room packed, 500 educators, administrators, policymakers. She clicked the remote. A slide appeared on the giant screen behind her. It wasn't a graph. It wasn't a quote from a textbook. It was the photo. General Hughes, kneeling on her classroom floor. "I am not the hero of this story. Mrs. Whitmore said into the microphone, her voice steady, humble. "I am the villain. I am the cautionary tale. But I am also proof that you can change if you are willing to do the work." She wasn't hiding from her mistake. She was broadcasting it. But while Mrs. Whitmore was on tour, the real revolution was happening back at Jefferson Elementary, led by a 10-year-old boy. And to understand the scale of that victory, you have to look at the lunchroom. Lucas Hughes wasn't sitting alone anymore. He had formed what the students called the Truth Squad. It started with D. Sean, but it grew. Tyler Bennett, the lobbyist's son, joined them. Sophia Wilson, the girl whose mother cleaned the Capitol, pulled up a chair. They created a peer mentoring program. One simple, ironclad rule: believe first. Question with kindness. If a first grader said their dad was an astronaut, the Truth Squad didn't laugh. They asked to see the moon rocks. They built a culture where truth was safer than silence. And the classroom? Room 3B had been transformed. On the back wall, painted in bright, mismatched letters by 25 different hands, hung the new classroom charter. In this room, everyone's story matters. Mrs. Whitmore, when she wasn't at conferences, started the Family Stories Circle, a time for sharing, unedited, unjudged. Sophia stood up. She told the class how her mother knew the secret history of the Capitol building better than the senators she cleaned up after. Mrs. Whitmore didn't check her watch. She leaned in, hearing the pride in the girl's voice. D. Sean explained how his dad built his mechanic shop from nothing, diagnosing engines by ear. Tyler Bennett admitted something too. After meeting the general, he realized service didn't just mean wearing a suit and shaking hands. And Lucas? He talked about the moving trucks. He talked about the missed birthdays. He talked about the fear of the doorbell ringing. When his dad was deployed, he wasn't the general's son anymore. He was just Lucas. General Hughes and Dr. Angelo Hughes attended every school event they could. Vincent didn't wear the uniform. He wore jeans. He sat in the back. He wanted Lucas to know he was proud of him for who he was. Not for the rank on his father's shoulder, but outside the safe bubble of Jefferson Elementary. The story had gone nuclear. The photo of the general and his son went viral. It was everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, the evening news. The caption told the story. The bias, the humiliation, the vindication. Social media exploded. People argued about racism, about classism, about the state of American education. But the most shared comment wasn't about the general. It was about the teacher. People were shocked to see an antagonist who actually apologized and changed. But we need to pause the feel-good music for a second. We need to look at the X-ray of why this went viral. Lucas Hughes' story is one child in one classroom in Arlington, Virginia. But it represents a crisis happening in every zip code in America. Right now, somewhere in Ohio, a black student is being questioned more harshly than his white peer for the same missing homework. Somewhere in Texas, a kid from a trailer park is being dismissed because a teacher assumes they're exaggerating. Their summer vacation. The statistics are not just numbers. They are alarming. According to the U.S. Department of Education, black students are suspended or expelled at 3 times the rate of white students. For the exact same infractions, we aren't talking about bringing a weapon to school. We are talking about subjective offenses, defiance, disruption, attitude, translation, when a teacher has to use judgment to decide if a kid is a leader or a troublemaker. The color of the student's skin often determines the verdict. A study by the American Psychological Association found something else. Black boys as young as 10 years old, Lucas's age, are perceived by adults as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers. They are given less grace, less benefit of the doubt, less childhood. Lucas Hughes experienced the weight of every single one of those statistics in a 90-minute window. And the cost? It's the invisible damage. Children who feel unheard don't usually fight back like Lucas did. They disengage, they stop raising their hands, they stop sharing their stories. They decide their truth doesn't matter, so they stop telling it. They fade into the background. Lucas Hughes survived because he had a 4-star general to walk through the door. But most kids don't have a general. Most kids just have their voice. And when that voice is crushed, it rarely comes back. Jefferson Elementary proved something. Systems can change. They implemented mandatory bias training. They changed the policy to verify before interrogating. They acknowledged the harm and built a firewall against it happening again. Mrs. Whitmore could have made excuses. She could have blamed the system. Instead, she looked in the mirror, saw the ugly truth, and decided to fix it. Lucas could have let the trauma make him small. Instead, he used it to build a shield for the other kids. That is resilience, not bouncing back, bouncing forward. But as the dust settles on Jefferson Elementary and the cameras move on to the next viral story, a massive question remains hanging over us. A question for every parent, every teacher, every person watching this. We know what Mrs. Whitmore did. We know what the general did. But the question is, what are you going to do? Because the next time a child tells you a truth that doesn't fit your worldview, you have a choice to make. And that choice starts with a single difficult question. When you see someone being treated unfairly, in a classroom, in a boardroom, or in a checkout line, do you speak up or do you stay silent? Because you don't want to make things awkward. Because here's the brutal reality. Silence is comfortable, silence is safe, but silence is also a verdict. If there is one thing the story of Lucas Hughes teaches us, it is this. The cost of silence is always paid by the victim, never by the we go from here. The screen is about to go black. You are about to click on the next video. But before you do, I want to issue 3 specific challenges. First, take action in your own zip code. If you are a parent, don't just sign the report card and move on. Ask your school the hard questions. Ask them, what policies do you have to protect students from discrimination? Do you offer implicit bias training? Be the squeaky wheel. If you are a teacher, look at your seating chart. Look at the kid you've labeled the class clown or the disruptive one. Ask yourself, are you giving every student the same benefit of the doubt? Or are your assumptions writing a story about them that they never agreed to? Second, talk about it. Conversations change culture. If this story made you feel something, anger, shame, vindication, share it, send it to a friend, post it in your family group chat. The more we talk about the invisible damage of bias, the harder it becomes for the system to ignore it. And finally, most importantly, teach the children in your life the lesson Lucas learned. Teach them their truth matters. Teach them they do not have to shrink themselves to make adults feel comfortable. Teach them that standing in your truth, even when your voice shakes, and even when you are standing alone, is always worth it. General Vincent Hughes didn't walk into Jefferson Elementary that morning to humiliate a teacher. He didn't do it to flex his rank or show off his stars. He walked in to stand beside his son. He walked in to show Lucas and every single child watching that they are seen, that they are heard, and that they matter. But remember, most kids don't have a 4-star general waiting in a black SUV. Most kids only have us. So the question is, what will you do with that responsibility? Will you scroll past this story and forget it by tomorrow morning? Or will you let it change? How you listen, how you believe, how you treat the people around you. Lucas Hughes proved that one person standing in their truth can change an entire system, but that only works if the rest of us are willing to listen. If this story moved you, I need you to do 3 things right now. 1, share this video. Someone in your life needs to hear this message today, and you might be the only person who can get it to them. 2, go to the comments section. I want to hear your story. Have you ever been disbelieved when telling the truth? Have you ever witnessed someone else's reality being dismissed? Your story matters, and this community wants to read it. 3, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We tell stories like this, stories about justice, redemption, and the hard truths of American life every single week. Remember, your truth matters, you matter. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I will see you in the next one.